Masampanayang adlaw, madawgan nga kurawan. A pleasant day to one and all. My greetings and respect to the school's division superintendent of the school's division of Antique, Ma'am Felisa Bibiryong, CESO 6. To the education program supervisor for Araling Panlipunan, and at the same time, the division IPEd focal person of the school's division of Antique, my good friend, Dr. Eleanor M. Dagala. To the technical working group facilitating for the conduct of this activity, and to all of you, participants to this division retooling for IPEd implementation. We will be talking about the key characteristics of Indigenous learning systems or ILS and their implications for indigenization. The presentation I am using is owned by the Indigenous Peoples Education Office or EPSEO of the Department of Education Central Office. Minor revisions were made in order to respond to the present needs in the conduct of this activity. This is Jesus Katigan Insilada at your service, the principal too, and at the same time the division IPEd focal person of the school's division of Iloilo. To start, we'll be talking about the characteristics and at the same time the implications of implications for indigenization of ILS. How do ILS work in our classroom and in the context of the present pandemic, the learning space in every home of our learners? Characteristic of ILS. The venue for learning is anywhere, anytime. And to make ILS work for our classrooms and for the learning spaces in the context of the present pandemic, we need to contextualize lessons to include the various settings and the life moments that are in the community. See the possibility of learners, the school participating in community events that are venues for passing on cultural practices. Second, the classroom is the whole area territory of the community. Maximize the community environment as the learning space. Some classes may be held outside the classroom when appropriate. In the context of the present pandemic, the whole home, the immediate surroundings, and the whole ancestral domain or the whole ancestral land becomes the classroom, the learning space of our learners, and we need to maximize the spaces and the various parts in order to integrate the different aspects of culture into the learning material and the learning experiences of an indigenous learner. For the curriculum, indigenous peoples, communities have indigenous knowledge, systems, and practices that comprise the curriculum of the community. The process of interface between the community's IKSPs and the national curriculum need to be undertaken, need to be emphasized. It is clear for us that the very reason why the IPEd program was contextualized and implemented is that we need to interface the regular curriculum in respect to the indigenous knowledge, systems, and practices of our indigenous learners. Then, IKSPs are generated and lived by a community. Communicate IKSPs as collective or community property. No one person can own the IKSPs, and therefore personal authorship or ownership is not possible. Case of community stories being authored by one person is not appropriate. We are always reminded that IKSPs are owned by the whole community and not by a single person. For um, authors, proponents, research proponents, we need to undergo the process called free, prior, and informed consent before we could publish our um, our works or our researches. And I believe the topic on free, prior, and informed consent, or FPIC, is included in this retooling. Another, IKSPs are content and competencies are embedded in the community's day-to-day activities and stages of human development or lifelong learning. Concepts and competencies can be related and discussed from the life experience and perspective of the community. Through the years, I have been advocating the CBIE program. CBIE stands for Culture-Based and Inclusive Education. And through this program, I was able to integrate um, the concepts and competencies anchored on culture for lifelong learning. We need to always anchor our lessons, be it in the form now of the SLMs and and self-learning kits or SLKs, um, by always considering the context and the culture of our learners. This is very true, not just for our indigenous learners, but even to our non-indigenous learners, because um, we need to provide relevant, accessible, liberating, as well as empowering education, be it in the form now of SLMs or SLKs through various platforms, ways, and means. Events and activities are the main experience through which fields of study are understood in relation to each other. Integrative teaching can be the approach used so that learning is more holistic. The IKSPs can be an integrative theme across subject areas. Yes, this is very, very true, and this is very, very applicable because IKSPs could be integrated across uh, different disciplines or learning areas, be it mathematics, we have tried that, be it language, sciences and mathematics, and social science also, social sciences. Um, ILS nurture learners to be culture bearers. Lessons are anchored on the community's way of life and geared towards building their capacity, to practice IKSPs and contribute to the community's cultural integrity while being discerning about cultural change. Yes, this is very, very true because as we advocate indigenous people's education, we are uh, creating and molding the younger generation to be culture bearers themselves. And of course, we as teachers are not just program implementers, but at the same time, culture bearers as well. Elders and culture bearers have a key role in the teaching learning process. Involve culture bearers as appropriate in the teaching learning process. One suggestion in the conduct of remote learning or home-based learning, and we shall call it also as community learning, is through the participation of the parents, learning facilitators, community leaders, and culture bearers to take part in the learning of the children, because through IPEd we have changed the mindset that um, our culture bearers and members of the community, especially ang waay abi nakatapos kapag eskwela, ang mindset natin nga hindi sanda makatubong o kung makabulig sa pagtuon kang anda nga mga kabataan, but in the implementation of IPEd, we tried to change that mindset nga ang kada isa kag isa may mabulig gid, no? Kay kung lang tawo natin language barrier malang ang kulang, kag ang aton nga mga kamalaman, although ay gid nakatapos ka ang mga pagtuon, pero diyan ka na nang ginatawag nga wisdom, diyan ka nang ginatawag nga indigenous knowledge systems and practices nga kinahanglan nga ipasa sa urihing tubo. Other sources of knowledge, the environment, other creatures, dreams are actively interacted with and valued. Acknowledge and respect other sources of knowledge experienced by IP learners. Tapos ng panahon nga ang teacher lamang ang um, sole source kang lesson sa sang ka-classroom, and in the context of the present pandemic, mas na-highlight ang posibilidad o kung ang kamatuuran nga ang tagsa-tagsa may maamot sa pagtuon kang mga kabataan. One example is when you integrate kung paano magtigang, kung paano pananim ka mga tanom, ano ang uses ka mga herbal plants natin sa palibot para sa ating nga ikayong lawas. Isa dya sa mga best examples natin kung paano natin ma-integrate ang nanari-sari nga mga sources, o kung paano natin magamit ang nanari-sari nga sources of knowledge sa aton nga palibot, sa aton nga community, nga dyan sa ating indigenous communities, sa ancestral domains or ancestral lands. So, i-acknowledge natin dyan sa tanan, including ang andang oral literature, for example, ang andang ginapatihan, ang andang worldviews, ang creatures nga makita lamang sa andang mga painuino kag mga daramguhanan. Sa teaching learning process, IKSPs are passed on to succeeding generations in the community, which we call intergenerational. We need to invite elders for particular topics or roles in co-curricular and extracurricular activities nga gusto natin baguhon. No? For example, kung nag-invite kita kang resource persons, ang gina-invite gid natin ang professional, ang nakatapos sa pag-eskwela, ang may mataas nga eskwelahan, pero nalimtan natin nga i-invite ang ating nga mga kamalaman, ang ating nga elders, ang ating nga community leaders, especially kung makigbahin sanda about sa indigenous knowledge on agriculture, healing, community relations, duro gid ang matun-an ka ating mga kabataan kung sanda ang ating nga gina-invite. Of course, i-balansehan natin, no? Because gina-respect natin ang sciences, ang andang indigenous knowledge systems and practices nga consider natin indigenous sciences. Content and competences are learned in a progressive and accumulative manner towards mastery or spiraling. IKSPs, when interfaced with the national curriculum, also need to be spiraled. Yes, need natin man nga spiral bangod ang indigenous knowledge systems and practices may halin man sa simple hasta sa complicated. So maumpisa kita anay sa ano ang simple kag ano ang complicated. Okay? Or interrelated o kon mas complex. Learning is in relation to the dynamics of the ancestral domain. Activities that harness observation of and relating with the environment are to be strengthened. Ang example na takadya, ang pag take good care kang environment, bangod ang kabuhi kang aton nga mga kabugtuan nga indigenous peoples closely knitted o kon naangat gid sa nanari-sari nga parts o kon aspects kang both physical kag imagined environment. The teaching learning process uses multiple forms of knowledge, storage, and transmission, or multiple intelligences. Actively employs strategies that encourage the use of multiple intelligences in the teaching learning process. Need natin nga i-integrate ang multiple intelligences bangod sa indigenous knowledge systems and practices, hindi lamang sa olohanay kang oral literature, dyan man makita ang skills sa farming, human relations, sa music, sa paghulag, synchronization, may dyan gani kita nga concept kang sibod, no? Or ang balance, ang synchronization, kag duro pa, no? Duro nga mga bagay ang kinahanglan natin tukibon tuhoy sa atin nga kultura. Especially ang mga panay bukidnon iraynon, may maduagon man kag manggaranon nga kultura. The dominant way of knowledge transmission is through oral means. Gani, kung maghambal kita nga indigenous knowledge systems and practices, most of them wa ay nasulat kundi pinaagi sa pahambal, no, nga pag-express. We need to cultivate the capacity of learners for oral knowledge transmission through stories and meaningful conversations. That is why we need to offer opportunities, learning opportunities for them to be engaged with the activities of their elders para ma-transmit kananda ang oral literature, for example. Need natin sa nga tawaan ka performance tasks wherein involved ang anda nga mga ginikanan, learning facilitators, community leaders, and culture bearers. So, need gid natin nga ipakita sa especially sa ginaobra natin ng mga teacher-made modules nga ang anda nga mga activities nakaplano wherein naka-integrate ang tanan nga himuon sa anda nga mga realities kag sa anda mga activities at home and in their communities. Learning is a collective process. Lifelong learning as a way of life is cultivated. So we need to foster group learning and group work, not just individual achievement. Foster learning as a day-to-day process instead of equating it only with schooling. Yes, matutuod gid ang ginahambal natin nga ang education waay lang man waay gid no na natuon lamang sa pagtuon sa ka specific, no, nga lugar, kundi ang education naga-extend kung paano sanda mag-interact sa community, paano sanda nagapakig-upod, nagapakig-imaw sa nga pamilya kag sa mga tawo sa komunidad, and that makes education more holistic nga ginatawag natin, and reality based. So kinahanglan natin i-foster ang learning as a day-to-day process, no. Waay nagauntat ang andang nga pagtuon, bisan sa andang pagturog, sa andang pagbugtaw, kag waay lamang nagaumpisa ang learning magsugod sa basa kang andang self-learning modules o kon self-learning kits, kundi nagasugod sa andang pagbugtaw kag bisan sa andang pagdaramguhanan. Learning by doing is one of the dominant teaching learning processes that has developed in some communities their innate talent. Lessons are designed to be experiential and activity-based. The community's talent skill is nurtured in learners. Kung balikan natin ang ating history, no, balikan natin kung paano ang aton nga education before nag-abot ang mga colonizers, makita natin nga ang pinaka mga manunudlo amo ang mga ginikanan o kon ang community leaders o kon mga culture bearers kag ang mas ginagamit nanda kadya nga mga activities o kon strategies o kon approaches ang mga culture based. Halimbawa, paano mo tudloan ang isa ka bata nga mga yam o kon paano mo tudloan nga magtig-ang o kon magdaha kanda nga mga pagkaon. So kinahanglan di nga may ginatawag nga uh, may una anay may observation, may pagtudlo, tapos ginalet do sanda, napabayaan sanda nga mag-explore, tapos gina-monitor, ginalantaw, gina-assess kung paano do nanda gina-perform ang isa ka skill nga ginatudlo ka nanda ka anda nga kamalaman. For example, amo ang paggamit kang pana, paano magamit kang sibat, paano ang magpangisda. So, naga-explore sanda kadya ka mga possibilities, pero dyan ang guidance kang anda nga mga manunudlo nga mo anda mga ginikanan, ang anda nga mga kapamilya, kag ang anda nga kang mga tao sa komunidad. Inner and outer senses are being developed. Inner senses, example, interpersonal sensitivity, intuitive learning are cultivated and strengthened. So, hindi man dyan bago ka natin nga principle o concept nga nag-develop kita kasang kabata, hindi lamang sa kung ano ang makita sa sagwa, kundi kung ano ang sulod ka anda nga tagipusoon. Kag, kag anda nga mga panimuot. Assessment of learning happens while the process of learning is happening. So we need to apply formative assessment, no, samtang naga perform sa kasang ka skill dyan kita or dyan ang andang mga manudlo mga ginikanan or kung learning facilitator agud i continuously assess ang andang learning process. The application and continuing practice of what has been learned in real life situations and in multiple contexts is key in evaluating if a learner has learned. Very, very true. So, in products and performance in assessments are to be highlighted. That is why marahalon gid nga may makita kita nga evidence of learning o kung may outputs gani pwede natin mahambal nga sadyang characteristic daw amo diyang ginatawag natin nga outcome based or project based. Amoyad to ang akong napagpagkigbahin kayo tuhoy sa key characteristics and implications of the indigenous learning systems or I mean indigenous learning systems kag salamat gid sa inyong pag-imaw kanakan. Iririmaw kita sa pag-implementar sa pagpatuman kang indigenous people's education kag iririmaw kita sa pagpangatubang kanjang pandemya bangod bisan may kabudlayan ang edukasyon magapadayon. Sa IPEd walang bibitiw. Sama-sama, tulong-tulong sa pagsulong ng katutubong edukasyon. Ako ang inyong abang lingkod na nagsasabing salamat, salamat gid.